Welcome to Twilight Terror Stories. Twilight is not just the end of day, it's the beginning of something else. A time when the shadows stretch and fear takes its first breath. You've stepped into that moment now, and the stories are waiting. Let them find you. Sleep remains a foreign country, its borders guarded by the specters of Blackwood Creek. Post-traumatic stress, the clinicians murmur, scribbling prescriptions. A tidy diagnosis for a mind fractured by what transpired that night, for a reality unstitched thread by thread. Perhaps committing it to paper, exercising these phantoms onto the page, will grant me passage back to the shores of rest. It began, as such descents often do, with misplaced bravado and too much ale. 5 souls adrift after celebrating Leo's minor corporate ascension at the Rusty Mug. Myself, Leo, Clara, Finn, and Maya. Someone, lost in the amber haze, proposed a nocturnal pilgrimage through Blackwood Creek. Barely a mile distant, the woods beckoned, and our intoxication painted the notion in hues of thrilling recklessness. A chill, sharp as broken glass, had descended to somewhere near 45 degrees as we breached the tree line. My phone glowed, 11:47 p.m. Above, a full moon bled pale light, yet the dense canopy swallowed most of it, leaving the path a ribbon of shadow. Phone torches sliced feeble cones through the dark as we stumbled along, laughter echoing unnaturally, shoves exchanged with the clumsy abandon of overgrown adolescence. "Careful!" Clara shrieked playfully as Leo feigned sending her tumbling into the undergrowth. Their mirth bounced between the ancient trunks. I trailed behind with Maya and Finn, the crunch of gravel underfoot a strangely loud punctuation in the gloom. Then came the silence. Not a gradual quieting, but an abrupt void, as if the world's breath had been stolen. The insectile thrum ceased. The breeze died utterly. Even our own footfalls seemed suddenly muffled, absorbed by the thirsty earth. "Wait," Maya whispered, halting. "Did you hear anything?" We froze. Nothing at first. Then a faint, dry skittering surfaced on the edge of hearing, like fingernails dragged delicately across weathered bark. It emanated from the deeper darkness flanking the trail. "Just a possum, maybe," Finn offered, though his voice betrayed a tremor. We pressed onward, drawn closer now by an unspoken anxiety. The scratching pursued us, a phantom companion. It shifted, now teasing from the left, now the right, sometimes seeming to brush the very air behind our backs. Yet each time we spun around, lights stabbing into the void, there was only emptiness. That's when the cabin materialized. It emerged around a curve, a solid block of deeper black against the already profound darkness of the woods. Perhaps 20 feet square, its log walls were ancient, the roof sagging precariously in the middle. No windows interrupted its blind face, only a door hanging askew on corroded hinges. "This is wrong," Leo breathed, his voice tight. He'd roamed these woods since childhood, knew their contours intimately. This shouldn't be here. Clara suggested a missed turn, a deviation from the known path. I fumbled for my phone, seeking the reassurance of a map, but the screen showed only no service. A ripple of unease went through the group as others checked. Their devices, too, were inert, drained despite full charges minutes before. The scratching intensified, closer now. A definite movement rustled the leaves just beyond our light's reach. A fleeting shadow, substantial yet shapeless. Instinct, raw and unreasoned, took over. Without a word exchanged, we bolted towards the cabin. Leo hit the door first, wrenching it open on a shriek of tortured metal. We tumbled inside, a frantic knot of limbs, Finn slamming the heavy panel shut behind us. Our combined phone beams carved out a stark interior. A single room, dirt floor packed hard, empty save for a decrepit wooden chair slumped in one corner and, set into the earth, what appeared to be a trap door bound with iron. The air hung thick and wrong, redolent of damp soil and something else, something organic and spoiled. God, what is this place? Maya whispered into the heavy air. Before an answer could form, heavy footsteps began outside. Slow, measured, circling the perimeter. The log walls groaned faintly, protesting pressure from without. Then the whispering began. It wasn't a language any of us knew. The sounds were guttural, thick with consonants that seemed to fold impossibly upon themselves, uttered by multiple throats. The susurrus grew, weaving a tightening net of alien sound. Clara's fingers dug into my arm like talons. You hear it, right? Tell me you hear it. We have to leave, Finn urged, taking a hesitant step towards the door. Instantly, the whispering ceased. The ensuing silence stretched, taut as wire, for maybe 5 heartbeats. Then, an impact slammed against the door with force enough to vibrate the very ground beneath us. Finn recoiled. Clara screamed, a raw tear in the sudden quiet. More blows rained down. On the walls, the sagging roof. Timbers groaned under the assault. Dust and debris sifted down from the unseen ceiling. "The trap door!" Leo yelled, already scrabbling at the iron ring embedded in the floor. "Help me!" Finn and I threw our weight into it. With a grating protest, the heavy wooden panel yielded, revealing a dark aperture, roughly 3 feet square, descending via crude wooden steps. The siege above intensified. A tearing, splintering sound suggested the roof was giving way. "Go!" I shouted, shoving them toward the opening. "Now!" Clara scrambled down first, then Maya. Finn followed. Leo paused at the precipice. "What about you?" "Right behind you. Go!" He vanished into the darkness below. I turned to follow, but the shriek of tortured wood from the main door arrested me. I spun back, flashlight beam trembling. Through the widening cracks, I glimpsed things. Motion that defied geometry. Limbs too long, too numerous, and eyes. Clusters of phosphorescent eyes burning in the dark. I practically fell down the steps, yanking the trap door shut above me, just as the cabin door imploded with a deafening crash. The crude stairs descended perhaps 15 feet into a narrow, earth-walled tunnel. Ahead, the bobbing lights of the others were already receding. I ran, forcing myself not to listen to the cacophony overhead. The scraping, the frantic chittering, the tread of impossible feet. The tunnel twisted, branched. We navigated by sheer momentum, taking turns at random, fleeing deeper into the cold earth. The walls transitioned from packed dirt to rough-hewn stone. Water dripped rhythmically somewhere ahead. After a passage of time that felt like an eternity, but was likely mere minutes, we slammed into a dead end. Solid rock. No way forward. "No," Clara sobbed, collapsing against the unyielding stone. "No, no. We turned, frantic, but the sounds from the tunnel behind us were drawing closer. Our lights revealed nothing but oppressive darkness, yet the whispers echoed, amplified by the stone confines, faster now, imbued with a terrifying urgency. "Lights out," Leo hissed, his voice barely audible. "What? Are you insane?" Maya shot back. "Just do it. Trust me. Kill the lights." One by one, our small beacons winked out, plunging us into a blackness so absolute it felt like a physical weight. I pressed my spine against the frigid stone, willing my breath to quiet, my heart to cease its frantic drumming against my ribs. The whispers slithered closer. A scent accompanied them, musty, cloying, fundamentally other, turning my stomach. A dry scraping sound echoed just around the unseen bend. I squeezed my eyes shut, a useless gesture in the crushing dark. The frantic pulse in my ears felt loud enough to betray us. The scraping stopped, seemingly inches away. I felt something brush my cheek, cool, rough, like desiccated bark. A gasp caught in my throat. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. The whispering was now a presence directly beside my ear. I could feel breath on my skin, but it wasn't warm. It was glacial, like a draft from subterranean depths. Then, as abruptly as it began, it ceased. The presence withdrew. We remained frozen in that Stygian tomb for what felt like hours. No one moved. No one breathed more than necessary. Finally, Finn's trembling whisper broke the spell. "Are they gone?" The silence stretched, profound and empty. After another eternity, Leo clicked his light back on. The tunnel before us was vacant. We waited another 10 minutes, hearts still pounding, before cautiously retracing our steps. Disoriented by panic, it took time to navigate the labyrinthine passages. Eventually, miraculously, we found the crude steps leading upwards. Leo ascended first, easing the trapdoor open. The cabin stood violated but empty. The main door hung in jagged splinters. Deep gouges scored the log walls, testament to the fury unleashed upon them. But the assailants were gone. We fled, bursting from the cabin's ruin into the pre-dawn chill, running without thought or word, fueled by primal terror. We didn't stop, didn't speak, until the sickly orange glow of street lights welcomed us back to the familiar world. The police, predictably, offered little solace. Their daylight search of Blackwood Creek yielded nothing. No cabin, no disturbed earth, no sign of the tunnels beneath. It was as if the entire episode had been a shared hallucination. We rarely speak of it now. Finn relocated to the coast. Clara and Maya faded from my life, calls unanswered. Leo remains in town, seeking refuge in the bottom of a bottle. I ventured back once, under the indifferent gaze of the sun, compelled to find the place, to impose logic on the illogical, hoping perhaps to silence the echoes in my mind. I found only familiar woods, mundane trails, but as I turned to leave, I heard it, just for a fleeting second, that dry, insistent scratching, and beneath it, almost subliminal, the faintest trace of whispers. I ran. Blackwood Creek remains forbidden territory for me. Yet, sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, I awaken to the sound of scratching. Not from outside, but from within my own walls. And if I press my ear close, straining against the plaster, I can almost discern words forming in that impossible, twisting tongue. The doctors offer pills and platitudes about trauma. They weren't there. They didn't hear the whispers that cling to the edges of silence. They didn't glimpse the things that peered through the shattered door. I set this down not for belief, but as a bleak cartography, a warning. Should you wander nocturnal woods and stumble upon a structure alien to the map, resist the sanctuary it seems to offer. Regardless of what pursues you from the darkness, do not breach that threshold. Because the entities dwelling in the cracks of our reality sometimes grow curious, and their curiosity is a consuming, terrible thing. Last night, the scratching returned, but this time, amidst the sibilant chorus, one word surfaced, chillingly clear. They were whispering my name. I recall the precise pivot point, the instant the mundane fractured. It arrived trailing the midday meal, a Tuesday draped in the flat, buzzing glare of office fluorescence. A hush had fallen over the floor, the kind that settles when colleagues linger in the break room's stale air or chase caffeine down sterile corridors. Sequestered in my partition-walled world, I wrestled with a spreadsheet whose columns swam, threatening a migraine. The day felt utterly prosaic, yet a dissonant chord hummed beneath the surface. Initially, the feeling was amorphous, a prickle of awareness like a static cling. Disquiet settled, a conviction that unseen eyes observed me. A slow scan revealed only empty aisles, vacant chairs standing sentinel under the stark lights. The sole soundtrack was the low thrum of the climate control, punctuated by the almost subliminal sizzle of the overhead fixtures. I forced my gaze back to the screen, battling the heavy-lidded drag of the post-lunch doldrums. Then a sound. Faint, dry, a scuttling friction. It mimicked my own chair legs grating against the low-pile carpet. I stilled, looked down. My chair was receding, inch by deliberate inch, drawn away from the desk. Not a jolt, but a smooth, relentless glide utterly alien to its nature. No draft stirred the air. The ventilation system had never possessed such subtle force. My pulse hammered against my ribs. A damp chill slicked my palms. I made no sound, uttered no gasp, simply watched its spectral retreat until, abruptly, it stopped. Nothing visible propelled it. No string, no hidden mechanism, nothing to dispel the burgeoning dread. For a suspended breath, paralysis claimed me. My thoughts scattered like dropped papers, frantically seeking purchase on logic. Unbalanced casters, an imperceptible floor incline. Yet I knew this chair, its familiar heft and stillness over months of use. It did not simply move. With a tremor in my hand, I reached, drew it back into place beneath the desk, the mundane action feeling absurdly defiant. A part of me, desperate for normalcy, yearned to dismiss it, to bury the anomaly beneath the looming deadline and the promise of escape at 5. Stress, I told myself, just stress manifesting strangely. Pushing back, I rose to investigate the possibility of a hidden prankster. Neighboring cubicles stood empty, their surfaces reflecting the sterile light, adorned only with the detritus of personality. Framed photos, neglected stress balls. Monitors remained dark, chairs unoccupied. The corridor stretched vacant. I strained my ears, listening for the ghost of a footfall, a stifled giggle. Only the building's mechanical sigh answered. Defeated and unsettled, I returned to my station, attempting to wall off the incident in some deep recess of my mind. The remainder of the afternoon unfolded without further strangeness. Leaving the office that evening, a residue of unease clung to me, dismissed as simple fatigue. The following morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. My chair sat precisely where I'd left it. The computer booted without protest. I clocked in, summoned the spreadsheet demons, and slipped into the familiar rhythm. I even managed a wry internal chuckle about the phantom chair, attributing it to overworked eyes. But around mid-afternoon, as I composed an email, a new sound intruded. A faint, rapid clicking, the staccato rhythm of a mouse being agitated. It emanated from a workstation 2 rows back, a cubicle I knew was seldom used, its computer habitually dormant. My fingers froze above the keyboard. I listened. The clicking persisted, perhaps 5 seconds, then ceased. Rising, I navigated the partitions. The monitor was a blank obsidian mirror. Beneath the desk, the computer tower was inert. No lights glowing, no fans whispering. The mouse rested placidly on its pad. I stared, feeling the fine hairs on my forearms prickle. I lifted the mouse, clicked its buttons experimentally. Nothing. No residual charge, no flicker of life. The system was undeniably offline. From that point, my senses sharpened to every anomalous sound. It wasn't the last time clicks echoed from dead machines. Over the ensuing week, sporadic bursts of phantom typing or frantic mouse clicks would erupt from unoccupied corners. Each time I investigated, each time I found only silent hardware and black screens. The first recurrence prompted a call to IT. I framed it cautiously. A possible electrical glitch, stray signals. They performed their diagnostics, tested connections, declared everything nominal. Nothing to worry about, they assured me. Worry, however, had already taken root. My gaze began to dart nervously. Headphones became unthinkable. I needed to hear everything. Every stray tap or click sent a jolt along my spine. Reason warred with experience. This isn't logical. This cannot be real. Yet the evidence of my senses was undeniable. Anxiety became a constant companion, fraying my sleep, splintering my focus at work. My productivity plummeted. The urge to flee the office at day's end became a desperate imperative. Then came the coffee break incident. Late afternoon, perhaps 3 o'clock. Tension coiled tight in my shoulders, demanding caffeine solace. I saved my work meticulously, locked the computer, double-checking the lock screen's familiar blue expanse, a ritual born of rising paranoia. Satisfied, I headed towards the break room. In the hallway, a brief exchange with a colleague about a new project delayed me. Minutes later, I stood by the machine, pouring steaming coffee, blowing gently on the surface until it was safe to sip. The ritual calmed me slightly. Returning to my cubicle, nothing initially seemed amiss. But as I settled into my chair, I saw it. The monitor was active. Open on the screen was a document I had never created. Leaning closer, I squinted at the text. It wasn't random characters, but neither did it form coherent words. Lines of jumbled symbols, like corrupted data or text, hammered out in frantic haste, filled the page. My first thought, had I accidentally opened something before locking? Evaporated instantly. I knew I hadn't. A cold sweat beaded on my forehead as I closed the phantom file without saving. Checking my recent documents confirmed my fear. The file's creation timestamp mocked me, dated just minutes prior, during my absence. My password was secure. The machine had been locked. There was no rational explanation. That evening, I cornered the IT technicians again. Remote access? A virus? Malware? They ran deeper scans, scrutinized system logs, their expression shifting from patience to mild exasperation. Nothing. No trace of intrusion, no malicious code. One offered a thin joke about an office poltergeist. I forced a brittle laugh, a knot tightening in my stomach. Ghosts weren't in my lexicon, but something undeniably haunted my workspace. A pervasive wrongness settled over the office air thereafter. Even bathed in the unwavering fluorescent glare, the atmosphere felt heavy, charged. Minor sounds made me jump. Late hours became ordeals to be avoided. In the days that followed, subtle disturbances persisted. Returning, after a brief trip to the filing cabinet, I'd find my chair angled slightly differently. Not every time, but often enough to erode my certainty. Locking my screen sometimes resulted in finding a random, innocuous folder open upon my return. Nothing critical, yet profoundly unsettling. Evidence of unseen interaction. Hesitantly, I confided in a couple of trusted colleagues. Initial reactions ranged from gentle mockery about overwork to suggestions of sleep deprivation. Eventually, I persuaded one, Leo, to remain after hours, a silent witness. We waited one evening, the office dimmed to security lighting, the silence amplifying every creak. For half an hour, nothing. Then, around 7 it came. The distinct soft clatter of keyboard keys originating 2 rows away. Leo's eyes widened, meeting mine. We moved together, stealthily, towards the sound. We found, predictably, a dark monitor, a cold tower, lifeless peripherals. Leo checked the cables, the power strip. Nothing. He looked genuinely spooked, murmuring an apology for his earlier skepticism. Validation offered cold comfort. It confirmed my sanity, but solved nothing. We reported it again. IT performed their rituals, found nothing, their patience visibly thinning. I became the nuisance caller, the one with the phantom computer problems. Without evidence, they could do no more. I was left adrift with the inexplicable, moving furniture, disembodied sounds, spectral documents. Dread became my default state upon entering the building each morning, a knot of anxiety tightening as I approached my cubicle. One evening, facing a critical report deadline, I stayed late. The cleaning crew's distant vacuum hummed, a lonely counterpoint to the building's low drone. Everyone else had departed. My section of the floor was deserted. My phone, inevitably, was dead, denying me the solace of music. Focus proved elusive, tension locking my shoulders and neck. Every few minutes, my head snapped up, scanning the periphery, anticipating movement, a sound. While typing, a sudden, unnatural coldness enveloped my back. The office temperature was regulated, stable, yet this was a distinct chill, raising gooseflesh on my arms. My breath hitched. I spun around, chair scraping, heart hammering against my sternum, half expecting an intruder. Empty air met my gaze. But my chair, it seemed to shudder beneath me, a slight, definite jostle, as if nudged by an unseen hand. Panic surged. Without saving, without a second thought for the report, I slammed the computer shut, grabbed my bag, and fled. The report could wait. I finished it remotely, huddled over my laptop at home, unwilling to spend another minute in that space. Returning the next day was an act of will. The dread remained, a constant, low-frequency hum beneath my thoughts. Approaching my cubicle became a ritual of apprehension, checking the chair's position, the monitor's state. Sometimes normalcy prevailed. Other times, small inconsistencies surfaced. A sticky note I hadn't written. Desktop icons subtly rearranged. It felt like sharing my space with an invisible, meticulous, yet ultimately inscrutable colleague. The thought of requesting a move surfaced, but articulating the reason felt impossible. How to explain phantom clicks and spectral documents to a manager without sounding unhinged? Fear of dismissal, of being labeled unstable, kept me silent. The days bled together, punctuated by these unsettling intrusions. Brief periods of quiet offered false hope, inevitably shattered by the click of a dead mouse or a mysteriously opened file. The constant vigilance eroded me. Sleep offered little respite. My interactions with colleagues grew strained, my jumpiness interpreted as irritability. I replayed each incident endlessly, searching for the logical key that refused to appear. Finally, the strain became unbearable. I approached HR, citing vague personal reasons, a need for a change of environment, when requesting a departmental transfer. They processed the request without probing too deeply. During the waiting period, I took frequent walks, needing escape velocity from my cubicle. Yet leaving it unattended felt like an invitation. That crawling sensation on my skin intensified whenever I stepped away, and often, upon return, some small alteration would confirm my fears. The chair shifted, a file opened. Relief washed over me, potent and pure, when the transfer was approved. On my final day in that cursed space, I packed my meager belongings. Taking down the few personal photos felt like dismantling a fragile defense. I powered down the computer a final time, a small surge of triumph rising within me. Escape. Yet, as I slung my bag over my shoulder, ready to leave that particular haunting behind, I heard it, a faint, dry scrape. I turned. My chair tilted back, just a fraction, mirroring its first spectral movement weeks ago. I didn't linger. I walked away, pulse drumming a frantic rhythm against my ribs, and didn't look back. In my new section of the building, the phenomena ceased. Calm returned, focus sharpened. Productivity rebounded, yet the memory remains indelible. Sometimes, passing the entrance to my old row, an involuntary glance, a half expectation of seeing that chair glide silently, or a monitor flicker to life with cryptic text. Few know the full story. Dismissal or disbelief are the usual currency for such tales. But I know. Something resided in that cubicle, an unseen presence interacting with my digital and physical space in the quiet moments, in the periphery. The logical explanation never materialized, but the feeling, the chilling certainty of being watched, of sharing my workspace with something inexplicable that never truly fades. Primal awareness often bypasses the conscious mind, a tremor before the earthquake. Ilara ambled along the forest track, breathing in the loamy perfume of decay and growth, the satisfying percussion of fallen leaves under her boots. A fragile normality held sway, right until the moment it fractured. One instant, she was adrift in pleasant thoughts. The next, an alien disquiet settled over her, sharp and insistent, a signal from the deep self that something fundamental was awry. Solitude was her chosen companion on these excursions, particularly within this unassuming preserve, blessedly free of crowds and clamor, just Alara and the breathing woods. This particular path, a mere suggestion diverging from the sanctioned route, was her own discovery, threading deeper into the arboreal heart. Previous visits had seen her turn back shyly from its depths. Today, however, lured by an adventurous current, she pressed onward. The farther she ventured, the more profound the hush became. Familiar woodland orchestrations, the staccato chatter of squirrels, the melodic pronouncements of unseen birds, attenuated, dissolving until only the sighing wind and the rhythm of her own passage remained. Initially, this profound stillness felt like sanctuary. Ancient trees, titans draped in moss, laced their boughs into a dense ceiling far above, through which sunlight dripped in hesitant golden pools, striping the forest floor with elongated shadows. But the sensation, that undeniable prickle of an unseen gaze, materialized without preamble. Alara halted, every nerve straining against the silence, nothing but the wind's whisper. Yet the fine hairs on her nape bristled. Her eyes swept the periphery, probing the latticework of trunks and shadow. Utterly alone. She attempted to dismiss the feeling, a phantom conjured by isolation, and resumed her pace. Paranoia, she reasoned, was a natural byproduct of such profound seclusion. Yet, with each step deeper, the conviction intensified, morphing into the near-physical pressure of eyes boring into her from the umbra between the trees. Then she registered him, a shape resolving in the distance, stark against the dappled light filtering onto the path ahead, motionless. Alara froze, her pulse leaping against her ribs like a frantic bird. Perhaps 100 feet separated them. He faced her directly, though details remained elusive. Just the stark outline of a tall man, unnervingly inert. A statue carved from shadow. The impulse to retreat surged, potent and immediate. Hikers weren't unheard of, surely. But this presence felt dissonant. The quality of his stillness was absolute, unnatural, and his arrival had been soundless. No crunch of leaves, no snap of twig, no disturbance of the air. With a forced casualness that felt absurdly thin, Alara lifted a hand. "Hello?" Her voice, amplified by the surrounding quiet, seemed to shatter something delicate. No reply, no flicker of movement. He simply stood, a fixed point on the path, his unseen face presumably turned towards her. His attention was a palpable weight. Her instincts screamed retreat, yet her feet felt rooted. "It's fine," she insisted internally. Someone disoriented, perhaps lost. But a deeper certainty whispered that this was fundamentally wrong. Tentatively, she risked a single step forward, her gaze locked on the figure. Another step. Then, as if tethered by an invisible thread, he mirrored her advance with a step of his own. Alara stopped. He stopped. A glacial chill traced her spine. Testing the impossible, she took a deliberate step backward. Again, he echoed the movement. Forward this time. Her heart hammered violently. Whatever game this was, whatever impossible reality unfolded before her, she desperately needed it to end. She spun around, abandoning any pretense of composure, and strode rapidly back the way she had come. She resisted the urge to look back, focusing on the path, the trees blurring past. But after perhaps a minute of strained, quickened steps, the compulsion became unbearable. A glance over her shoulder confirmed it. He was following, visible through the shifting screen of trees, still distant but undeniably closer, maintaining a slow, relentless pace, as if time were irrelevant. Her brisk walk dissolved into a jog, then escalated into a desperate sprint. The absurdity struck her, a cliché flight from a slasher film, but raw, unthinking terror propelled her onward. Escape was the only imperative. The path coiled and twisted, momentarily hiding him from view, yet the gut-wrenching certainty of pursuit never lessened. Her breath tore raggedly in her throat. Her muscles screamed protest as she drove herself faster, harder. The main trail couldn't be far, surely, though the distance felt agonizingly stretched. Finally, she burst through a final curtain of foliage onto the wider, familiar path, collapsing against a tree, gasping, lungs ablaze, heart pounding painfully against her sternum. She whirled around, bracing for him to emerge from the shadowed woods behind her, but there was nothing. The way she had come was empty, serene. Just trees swaying softly, leaves whispering in the breeze. No footsteps, no figure. A void where the presence had been, as if he had dissolved into the very air. She lingered only moments, gulping air, her mind scrambling to reconcile the terror with the sudden emptiness. Had she hallucinated? Had solitude and fear conspired to create a phantom? No. The memory was too visceral, too real. He was real. He had followed. Shaking off the paralysis, she practically ran the remaining distance to the small parking lot, her head constantly swiveling, half expecting his reappearance at every turn. The trail remained stubbornly vacant. Reaching her car felt like breaching a sanctuary. She tossed her pack onto the passenger seat, slammed the door, and fumbled with the locks, her fingers trembling uncontrollably. The ignition key resisted her unsteady hand. As she finally pulled away, her eyes obsessively scanned the rearview mirror, anticipating the sight of him standing at the tree line, a silent sentinel watching her departure. The asphalt ribbon unspooled behind her, empty. She drove for miles, putting distance between herself and the unsettling woods. Yet the phantom sensation lingered. A cold spot on her neck, the persistent illusion of eyes watching from the back seat. Days bled into a week, the encounter replaying itself relentlessly in her mind. She rationalized, a local eccentric, a prankster. But conviction faltered against the chilling memory of his inhuman stillness, his silent, mirroring pursuit. It felt other. Compelled by a need for validation, or perhaps exorcism, she returned to the park, this time accompanied by her friend, Liam. They kept strictly to the main, sun-dappled trails. The woods felt benign, ordinary, peaceful even. But as they neared the junction, the spot where the narrow side path should have branched off, Ilara stopped and stared. The path was simply not there. She walked to the exact point she remembered, scanning the undergrowth, the trees. Nothing. No break in the foliage, no hint of a worn track. It was as if the woods had sealed the way, erasing any evidence of its existence. Liam looked at her, puzzled. "You sure this was it?" he asked, gesturing vaguely at the seamless wall of green. Alara nodded slowly, a sickening unease churning within her. She was certain. That path had been real. She had walked it. She had fled down it. And now it was gone, swallowed whole by the silent, watchful woods. The twin beams of the headlamps gave a spasmodic shudder, blinked out, and surrendered us to the absolute night. A final, rattling exhalation from the engine, and the car drifted into silence, a metal husk on the serpentine ribbon of road. My hand twisted the ignition key. The starter replied with a defeated, metallic click. Motionless, stranded. "This isn't real," Clara breathed beside me, her voice stretched thin as wire. In the faint moonglow piercing the canopy overhead, her form was a mere silhouette against the deeper black. My phone, predictably, displayed only stark emptiness. No service. Civilization felt galaxies away, swallowed by the dense, breathing forest. Our GPS, possessed by some electronic gremlin an hour prior, had lured us onto this forgotten track, a line absent from any map we possessed. So, Leo, what now? Panic frayed the edges of her question. I peered through the dusty windshield, eyes straining against the gloom. Then, a flicker. Off to the right, nestled deep within the trees, a fragile luminescence pulsed. "Look," I pointed, my voice tight. "A light. Some kind of dwelling, maybe? Could be a phone, a lifeline." Clara drew back. "Leo, I don't know. Just walking up to some isolated house out here? It feels wrong." Her apprehension was a cold knot in my own gut, yet the alternative was stark. That, or we become fixtures in this car until morning, praying for a passerby on a road that feels like it hasn't seen traffic since the last ice age. A resigned sigh escaped her. "Fine, but we tread carefully, very carefully." We retrieved meager flashlights from the glove compartment, their beams slicing weakly into the damp, cool air thick with the aroma of pine needles and sodden earth. Gravel crunched underfoot as we navigated towards the distant glow. It resolved itself slowly. A farmhouse, large and antiquated, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin, a porch sagging under the weight of years. Yet warm light spilled from its windows, a beacon promising warmth, perhaps salvation. We reached the threshold, my knuckles poised to rap against the wood. Before contact, the door creaked inwards, revealing a man, tall and gaunt, his hair the color of ash, eyes sunk deep in their sockets. "Evening," he rasped, the sound like stones grinding together, though not entirely devoid of welcome. "What misfortune brings you folks wandering this late?" I relayed our predicament. The dead car, the isolation. A slow, sympathetic smile cracked his weathered face. "Engine trouble's a cruel mistress on these roads. Silas, that's me. Best come inside out of the night. We'll figure something out." Clara's fingers tightened on my hand, a silent plea for caution, but the man's apparent geniality, coupled with the tangible warmth radiating from the doorway, proved too potent a lure. We stepped over the threshold into a space suffocatingly dense with possessions. Every flat surface groaned under stacks of yellowed newspapers, peculiar knickknacks, bits of machinery coated in grease. The air hung heavy, layered with stale tobacco and an acrid, unidentifiable tang. "Agnes!" Silas bellowed towards the back of the house. "Got visitors!" From a doorway draped with a faded curtain, the kitchen, presumably, emerged a woman, short and round, her gray hair escaping its pins in a chaotic halo. She wiped flour-dusted hands on a stained apron, beaming a smile that seemed painted on, failing to ignite her eyes. Goodness me, company at this hour, how unexpected. Her voice was a high, thin whistle. "You poor souls must be chilled to the bone. Sit yourselves in the parlor whilst I fetch some hot tea." Before objections could form, Agnes propelled us towards a cramped room dominated by a vast, threadbare sofa. The walls were a gallery of sepia-toned photographs, the faces within staring out with unnerving stillness. Silas sank into a dilapidated armchair opposite us. "So, where were you aiming for?" I sketched the outlines of our journey to visit Clara's parents, deliberately vague. As I spoke, Silas's gaze flickered between us, assessing, weighing. Agnes bustled back in, bearing a tray laden with mismatched cups and a plate of pallid cookies. As she leaned over to set it down, the strange chemical scent spiked again, sharp like solvent or degreaser. Right then, Silas leaned forward, his chair groaning in protest. "That car of yours. I've got a knack for engines. Come morning, I'll take a look-see. Too dark now, and these woods, well, they have their ways at night." Clara and I exchanged a loaded glance. The prospect of spending the night under this roof prickled my skin, yet stumbling back to the derelict car through the oppressive darkness felt infinitely worse. "That's exceptionally kind," Clara offered, her voice carefully neutral. "But we truly wouldn't want to impose. If we could just trouble you for your telephone, call a tow service." "Ah, the phone," Agnes interjected smoothly, her smile unwavering. "Line's been dead for days now. Service out here is dreadful, simply dreadful. But you mustn't fret. We've a guest room upstairs, plenty of space." As she spoke, my eyes snagged on a dark, damp patch blooming on her apron. In the dim lamplight, it looked disturbingly like fresh blood. Silas, perhaps sensing my scrutiny, shifted abruptly, blocking my view. "Settled," he declared, a touch too heartily. "You'll stay. We'll sort the car come sunrise. Now, hunger must be gnawing at you. Agnes makes a stew that'll warm your insides." My stomach rumbled its assent, a traitorous reminder of our skipped dinner. Despite the rising tide of unease, I heard myself agree. Following them towards another room, I leaned close to Clara, whispering, "Something's not right here." She gave the barest nod, her face pale. "I feel it too. But what else can we do? Get through the night. Leave at first light." The dining room mirrored the house's chaotic state. The table bore mismatched china and cutlery dulled with age. Agnes ladled a thick, murky stew into bowls. Its aroma, surprisingly, was rich and savory. As we ate, Silas spun tales of the farm, the surrounding wilderness, his knowledge intimate, unsettling. He spoke of hidden grottos, forgotten pathways, his descriptions almost unnervingly vivid. "Thing is," he mused, candlelight glinting in his deep-set eyes, "these woods, they swallow people, hikers, folks who lose their way. Sometimes they just vanish." Beside me, Clara went rigid. Silas's tone was light, conversational, yet beneath it pulsed something cold. A warning, or worse. Agnes emitted a nervous titter. "Oh, Silas, don't you go spooking our guests with your morbid tales. They look ready to drop, poor things." As if summoned by her words, an immense weariness washed over me. My limbs turned to lead, my eyelids felt weighted. I fought to focus, glancing at Clara. Her head was drooping, her struggle mirroring my own. Alarm bells clanged faintly in the fog descending upon my mind. I tried to push back my chair to stand, but my legs refused the command. Think we need sleep," I mumbled, the words thick and clumsy on my tongue. Silas's smile stretched, revealing more teeth than seemed natural. "But of course. Agnes, dear, show our weary travelers to their room." The ascent up the creaking staircase passed in a haze. Agnes's reedy voice chattered on, a meaningless drone as she guided us into a small, airless bedroom permeated by the scent of dust and decay. A single, narrow bed dominated the space. The moment she retreated, closing the door behind her, Clara and I practically fell onto the thin mattress, the encroaching stupor too powerful to resist. Hours later, I surfaced abruptly, my skull throbbing. Pitch darkness pressed in. Disorientation reigned for a beat, then memory flooded back. The breakdown, the farmhouse, Silas, and Agnes. My hand scrabbled for my phone. Its weak screen illuminated the time, 3:17 a.m. Clara slept beside me, breathing deeply, lost to the world. Then I heard it. Voices from below, muffled but distinct through the old floorboards. I held my breath, straining to decipher the words. "Prime specimens. Fetch a high price. Need to work fast." Ice water sluiced through my veins as the meaning solidified. We weren't guests, we were inventory. Urgency clawed at me. I shook Clara awake, my hand instinctively covering her mouth to smother her gasp. "We have to get out," I hissed, the words raw with fear. "Now. This is bad." Her eyes flew open, wide with terror. Silently, we slid from the bed, each creak of the floorboards underfoot an explosion in the stillness. The hallway stretched before us, a corridor of shadows. The low murmur of voices still drifted up from downstairs. Step by agonizing step, we descended the stairs. Near the bottom, a sliver of light bled from beneath a closed door. The cellar. We were feet from the front door when my weight found a loose board. It groaned, a sound loud as a gunshot in the quiet house. The voices below ceased instantly. "Hear that?" Silas's voice, stripped of all warmth, sharp as broken glass. No hesitation. We lunged for the door, fingers fumbling with the unfamiliar latch. Behind us, the cellar door banged open. Heavy footsteps pounded on the stairs. We burst into the cool, damp night, sprinting blindly down the overgrown track towards the road, the sound of Silas shouting curses lost in the frantic hammering of my own heart. We ran, lungs burning, fueled by sheer terror, never once looking back. Gasping, sides aching, we stumbled back onto the road beside our silent car. On a desperate whim, I slid into the driver's seat, turned the key. The engine caught, sputtered, then roared to life. A resurrection, a miracle. Tires spat gravel as we accelerated away, leaving the decaying farmhouse and its predatory occupants shrinking in the rearview mirror. The sense of a narrowly averted, unthinkable fate clung to us like the damp night air. Silence reigned in the car for a long time, the weight of the unspoken pressing down. Only when the distant, welcoming lights of the next town bloomed on the horizon did Clara finally speak, her voice trembling. Leo. What were they? What were they going to do? I shook my head, the images conjured by those overheard words too grotesque to articulate. I don't know, Clara. I don't ever want to know. Let's just thank whatever stars are watching that we're out. Pulling into the sterile brightness of a gas station, surrounded by the mundane reassurances of normal life, I made a silent, ironclad promise. No detour, no matter how arduous, would ever again lead us to seek refuge with strangers on a lonely road cloaked in darkness. Glass, splintering like fractured ice, detonated the profound hush of the deserted apex spire. The sound ripped through the rhythmic trance of my nightly cleaning, jolting me upright. A cold fist clenched around my pulse. The building's vast solitude was no longer mine alone. What had begun as just another shift, adrift in the quietude with only my audiobooks for company, was twisting into a desperate ballet of shadow and pursuit, where survival hinged entirely on the map of this place etched into my very bones. My name is Elias. For half a decade, the towering skeleton of Apex Spire has been my nocturnal domain. Janitorial work lacks luster, certainly, but the steady pay and the deep, echoing silence were compensation enough. 30 stories of steel and glass, from the penthouse suites breathing rarefied air down to the subterranean warren of storage. I knew its every secret passage, every whispering vent, every temperamental light fixture. An intimacy I never imagined would become my shield against catastrophe. Midnight had bled into the new day when the first crystalline crack echoed upwards. I was navigating the 15th floor's labyrinth of cubicles, the vacuum cleaner humming its monotonous song. A phantom sound, perhaps? The spire groaned and sighed constantly, settling its immense weight like a slumbering giant. But then came the voices, low, sharp whispers slicing through the stillness, drifting from the elevator bank. Instinctively, I killed the vacuum's drone. Silence flooded back, thick and charged. My heart hammered against my ribs. These weren't the slurred tones of late-working executives or the apologetic murmur of someone retrieving forgotten keys. These were trespassers, at least 3, judging by the overlapping guttural sounds. I sank behind the flimsy partition of a cubicle, straining to decipher their words. Muffled, indistinct, yet fragments pierced the distance. Server room, clocks ticking. My thoughts scattered like dropped pins. The 20th floor, that housed Apex Corp's digital heart, pulsing with proprietary data. Whatever their objective, it stank of violation. A surge of adrenaline demanded action. But what? I was Elias, the polisher of floors, not a sentinel. My fingers, slick with sudden sweat, fumbled for my phone. A call, police, security, but the screen displayed only mocking emptiness. No signal. The spire's dense core often swallowed transmissions, and tonight I was entombed in a dead zone. Footsteps scraped closer. The elevator sighed open nearby. They were here, on this level. Motion, swift and silent, was my only recourse. I flowed towards the stairwell door, a ghost in my own workspace. Just as my hand closed on the cool metal bar, the elevator chimed its arrival. I slipped through the doorway, pulling it softly shut behind me, my breath catching in ragged bursts. Down. I had to get down. The ground floor security station held a landline, a lifeline if I could reach it unseen. Descending the concrete steps, I forced my footfalls into silence, a near impossible task. 2 flights down, the heavy door above me groaned open. Cold dread washed through me. "Hey, you, freeze!" The command, rough and commanding, echoed down the shaft. Thought evaporated. Instinct took over. I bolted, taking the stairs in clumsy, leaping bounds, the keys clipped to my belt, jangling like frantic alarm bells. Behind me, the heavy thud of boots pounded in pursuit, closing the distance. I burst onto the 10th floor landing, sprinting down the carpeted corridor, the air tearing past my face. They were right behind me, their breathing harsh. Desperation fueled a sudden dive into a darkened conference room. I scrambled beneath the massive mahogany table, curling into the shadows, pressing my face against the cool floor. I held my breath until my lungs burned. Boots entered the room, pacing, searching. "Damn it, where'd he vanish?" one voice snarled. "Check everywhere," commanded another. "Can't have gone far." Through the gap between the table's edge and the floor, I saw their feet, heavy work boots moving with predatory purpose. One pair stopped inches from my refuge. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for discovery. Then, a shout from the hallway, "Think I saw him head this way." The boots pivoted, moving away. The hunters rushed out, their footsteps receding down the corridor. A fragile silence settled. I remained frozen, listening to the frantic thrum of my own blood before daring to inch out from under the table. This sanctuary was temporary. They'd realize the ruse, circle back. I needed an advantage, an escape route they wouldn't anticipate. And then it surfaced from the deep archive of my building knowledge. The old service elevator. Seldom used, tucked away behind a maintenance panel disguised as a section of wall. If I could reach it. I slipped from the conference room like smoke, every nerve alight, tuned to the slightest sound. Above, frustrated shouts bounced down the stairwell. Swiftly, silently, I navigated the hallway towards the far end where the innocuous panel waited. My fingers brushed its cool, painted surface just as the stairwell door slammed open again. "Sweep this floor, now!" The command cracked like a whip. "He's gotta be here." My hands trembled violently as I fumbled with my keyring, the metallic clatter deafening in the tense quiet. Which one? The footsteps pounded closer, louder. There. The key slid into the hidden lock. A faint click echoed as I turned it, simultaneous with a triumphant yell from behind. "There he is!" I wrenched the panel door open, tumbling into the dusty space beyond and slamming it shut. No lock on this side. My eyes darted around, landing on the discarded mop leaning against the wall. I jammed its handle diagonally against the door, a flimsy barricade, praying it would grant me moments. The service elevator stood before me, its metal doors parted slightly as if in welcome. I lunged inside, stabbing the button for the ground floor. As the doors slid sluggishly closed, I saw the maintenance panel shudder violently under the impact of a heavy shoulder. The descent began, a slow, grinding journey downwards. Muffled shouts and furious banging filtered from above. I prayed the lift's notorious groans and creaks wouldn't betray my position. Passing the 5th floor, the carriage lurched, shuddered, and stopped dead. My own heart seized with it. Had they cut the power? Found an override? The emergency lights flickered, threatening to plunge me into absolute darkness. Then, with another jarring shudder, the elevator resumed its crawl. It finally reached the ground floor with an almost gentle ding. I was coiled, ready to explode outwards. The doors parted, and I surged forward, directly into the sturdy chest of a uniformed police officer. Relief washed over me in a dizzying wave, buckling my knees. The lobby teemed with officers, weapons held at the ready. "Easy there, sir. You all right?" the officer asked, his grip steadying me. I could only nod, gulping air. Just then, commotion erupted from the main elevator bank. The intruders emerged, wrists bound in cuffs, their faces masks of disbelief and fury. My desperate flight, it turned out, had tripped numerous silent alarms woven into the building's security network. The system I'd often grumbled about during routine tests had become my unseen guardian. The ensuing hours dissolved into a haze of flashing lights, formal statements, and lukewarm coffee. The men, I learned, were professionals, part of an industrial espionage outfit targeting Apex Corp's sensitive research. Had I not been present, had my frantic escape not activated the alarms, they might well have succeeded. As the first hints of dawn painted the city skyline, I sat on the cold steps outside Apex Spire, watching the last police cruiser pull away. I felt hollowed out, an exhaustion deeper than mere physical fatigue settling into my bones. Mr. Sterling, Apex Corp's CEO, emerged and sat beside me, his expression serious. "Elias," he began, his voice low and resonant, "there aren't words adequate to thank you. You averted a disaster for this company tonight." I managed a small shrug, uncomfortable under the weight of his gratitude. "I was just trying not to get caught," I mumbled. He shook his head firmly. "You could have hidden, waited them out, but you acted. You used your knowledge, your courage. You protected more than just yourself. You protected all of us." He paused, studying my face. "Our head of security is retiring next month. After tonight, I can't imagine entrusting Apex Spire to anyone more capable. How would you feel about a significant change in responsibilities?" I stared, momentarily speechless. "Mr. Sterling, I'm a janitor." A faint smile touched his lips. You're the man who single-handedly outmaneuvered a team of skilled thieves using nothing but your wits and an unparalleled understanding of this building. Elias, I believe you're considerably more than just a janitor." As the sun climbed higher, bathing the glass facade in hues of rose and gold, something mirrored that ascent within me, a burgeoning sense of pride, of capability, a purpose I hadn't known I possessed. I met Mr. Sterling's gaze and nodded slowly. "I'd be honored, sir." The night had irrevocably altered me. I had stared down raw fear and emerged on the other side, discovering reserves of strength previously unknown. Standing up, ready to embrace this unexpected trajectory, I looked up at the familiar structure. The building I had meticulously cleaned, whose every square inch I thought I knew, still held surprises. And apparently, so did I. The next time I entered Apex Spire, it wouldn't be pushing a cleaning cart, but carrying the weight of a new duty, a newfound respect. The night janitor had faded with the darkness. In his place stood the new guardian, ready to defend the building and its inhabitants with the same quiet resolve and intimate knowledge that had saved him. Life, I saw with sudden clarity, often pivots on the unforeseen. Sometimes the very elements we perceive as limitations, a humble job, and encyclopedic knowledge of corridors and crawl spaces, transform into our most potent assets. Courage lies dormant until the moment demands it. Gazing up at the soaring lines of Apex Spire, I felt ready. I knew now that we are all architects of possibilities far grander than we imagine. Sometimes it simply takes a night shrouded in terror to reveal the true strength of our foundations. That Saturday morning found me adrift, propelled by sleeplessness and the arid ache in my throat toward the hushed interior of the instrument shop. Inspiration, that fugitive spark, had eluded me, leaving behind only restless nights. Inside, the air hung thick, a potent perfume of aged timber and rosin dust. Violins, violas, cellos, scarred veterans of countless performances, lined the walls like silent sentinels. Somewhere, a small heater offered a low, persistent drone against the quiet, punctuated by the occasional nervous flicker of the fluorescent tubes overhead. My gaze drifted, a skittish bird seeking a perch, across shelves laden with bows resting against a counter scarred by time and use. Then, tucked away near the back, a particular violin snagged my attention. It wasn't merely old, it seemed weary in some profound, atypical way. Its varnish possessed a strange, matte quality, drinking the weak light. The scrollwork, the delicate carvings adorning its neck and back, were executed with unnerving precision, yet their forms, tiny, interlocking spirals and symbols, resisted immediate comprehension, unsettlingly alien. A peculiar prickling sensation danced across my fingertips, an involuntary urge to bridge the distance, to feel its wood beneath my hand. I navigated the cluttered aisles toward the proprietor, an elderly man named Silas, whose eyes swam behind thick, distorting lenses. A fine mantle of dust softened the shoulders of his tweed jacket. "I'm searching," I began, my voice raspy, "for an instrument with history, something unique." He regarded me for a moment, a slow appraisal, before offering a non-committal lift of his shoulders. "Try whatever calls to you," he murmured, gesturing vaguely. I returned to the strange violin, lifting it from its resting place. Its weight felt substantial, grounding. The intricate carvings pressed, a tactile riddle against my palm. The wood beneath felt subtly coarse, unfinished. A faint, elusive scent clung to it, something acrid, almost like scorched earth. As I nestled it beneath my chin, the cool kiss of the chin rest against my skin sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. I plucked the open strings. The resonance vibrated oddly, tightening something low in my gut, leaving a peculiar, lingering echo in the shop's pregnant silence, a silence broken only by the heater's hum. Drawing the bow across the strings in a simple scale, each note seemed shadowed by a softer, delayed whisper, as if the violin itself were murmuring a ghostly counterpoint. I tried to dismiss the sensation, but a sideways glance caught Silas observing me, his expression unreadable behind the glass. "Don't know much about that one," he offered, his voice flat. "Been here a good long while." He named a price, surprisingly modest. Bargaining felt irrelevant. The transaction was swift. The violin was mine. Back within the familiar confines of my apartment, a compact space dominated by a composition desk, a threadbare armchair, and a lamp that bled weak yellow light, I laid the violin on the sofa. There was no proper place for it, no stand worthy of its strangeness, so it leaned there, an enigmatic guest. I simply stared. The carvings seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light, spirals coiling into intricate knots that defied easy understanding. A disquieting mix of apprehension and electric excitement churned within me, my heart thrumming a nervous rhythm against my ribs. Throwing open a window, I let in the city's breath, the rumble of passing cars, the occasional impatient bleat of a horn. Later, needing the anchor of routine, I retrieved the instrument for warm-up exercises, launching into a piece currently consuming my focus. With each run, a subtle darkening occurred, not merely an emotional coloration, but an audible shift in the timbre itself. The notes acquired a deeper, almost throaty resonance, as though the wood were finding its own voice, ancient and resonant. A tremor started in my hands. I forced slow, deliberate breaths to steady myself, feeling the dampness bead on my forehead. That phantom echo, the one from the shop, returned. Faint, yet undeniably present, each played note trailed by its spectral repetition. It made no logical sense within the cramped acoustics of my room. Pausing, I rested the violin on my lap, the frantic pounding in my chest loud in the sudden quiet. I busied myself with tuning, the slow turn of the pegs, the careful listening as strings tightened toward pitch, a futile attempt to dispel the tension coiling inside me. I pushed myself through 2 more hours of practice. By the time the sun bled away, leaving the room steeped in twilight, my eyes burned with fatigue. With a sense of finality, I placed the violin in its case, the clicks of the latches sounding unnaturally loud, and slid it shut. Sleep offered no refuge. Sometime around the desolate hour of 3, I surfaced abruptly, finding myself perched on the edge of my bed, the violin inexplicably cradled in my hands. Moonlight, filtered through the gap in my curtains, striped the floor. My mind felt thick, fogged, utterly blank as to how I'd arrived here. A slow, dragging melody unfolded beneath my fingers, notes low and mournful, drawn out like sighs. My throat constricted, my hands unsteady. With a gasp, I forced myself to return the instrument to its case, ensuring the lid was secured, before shoving it beneath the bed frame. I crawled back under the covers, my body rigid, listening. The ghost of the final note seemed to linger, impossibly close, long after the violin was silenced and hidden. Morning arrived gray and reluctant. A dull ache radiated from my neck. Beneath the bed, the case lay partially ajar. A cold certainty gripped me. I had latched it securely. Unease churned my stomach into knots. I rose, rubbed the sleep from my eyes, dressed mechanically. Breakfast was a failed ritual. A few dry bites of toast. My phone buzzed, ignored messages accumulating like unanswered questions. My attention snagged inevitably on the violin. Perhaps confronting it, understanding its mechanics, would dispel the unease. I retrieved the case, setting it on my desk. Opening it, the violin appeared unchanged, save for those unsettling carvings. I decided on a meticulous cleaning, wiping the wood gently with a soft cloth, inspecting the bridge, the fine tuners, the strings. All seemed physically sound. Tucked within a small compartment, however, I found a brittle slip of paper. On it, sketched in faded ink, were symbols mirroring those etched into the violin. The same cryptic swirls. No words, just the silent, repeating pattern. Uncertain, I pushed it aside. Practice began again. The initial scales sounded ordinary, grounded. But as I ventured into more complex passages, the phantom echo resurfaced, insidious. My mouth went dry. I fought to ignore it, but the sensation intensified, swelling in my perception until it felt like a second violin played just behind my shoulder. Lowering the instrument, I pressed my fingertips to my temples, my palms clammy. An idea sparked, record myself. Proof, perhaps, that it was merely auditory hallucination. I set my phone to record, played a short phrase, then listened back. Only my playing, clean and singular, echoed from the speaker. Yet, in the room, in real time, the spectral harmony persisted. I found myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting an unseen accompanist. I was utterly alone. By session's end, the violin's voice had deepened further, burrowing into darker registers. The E string, typically bright, almost piercing, now sounded muted, veiled, as if shrouded in sorrow. Wiping sweat from my brow, I paced the small apartment, seeking refuge in mundane actions. Opening the fridge, drinking water. Clarity remained elusive. Returning to the desk, I decided a respite was necessary. The violin went back into its case. I clicked the latches firmly, decisively, then buried it deep within my bedroom closet, behind a barricade of old jackets. That afternoon, I attempted composition, pen hovering over staff paper. Melodies flickered, refusing to cohere. My thoughts kept snagging on the instrument hidden away. My gaze strayed compulsively toward the bedroom door. A creeping dread settled, cold and heavy, in my stomach. I turned on music, loud, anything to fill the silence. The hours crawled. No more practice. Television offered distraction, but the narrative blurred, meaningless. Intermittently, a faint, high tone seemed to pierce the background noise, emanating, I imagined, from the closet's depths. I killed the TV, sat perfectly still, straining to hear. Silence. A dull throb started behind my eyes. Later, much later, drifting in the armchair's worn embrace, a sharp, resonant ping jolted me awake. The violin. It was in my lap. Again. I nearly dropped it, a strangled gasp escaping my lips. My chest seized, hands turning icy cold. Blinking against the lamplight, still burning, forgotten, disorientation washed over me. How? When? My pulse hammered a frantic tattoo against my eardrums. My skin prickled. The room was utterly still, yet the violin felt strangely warm beneath my fingers, as if recently, intensely played. My fingertips smarted. Forcing myself upright, I set it carefully on the coffee table. I paced, floorboards groaning beneath my weight, thoughts scattering like startled birds. Was I fracturing? Losing my grip? In a sudden need for clarity, for banishment, I turned on every light, bathroom, kitchen, hallway, every lamp, pushing back the encroaching shadows. Darkness felt predatory. The violin sat on the table, impassive. I scrolled through my phone, a desperate grasp for normalcy, but my eyes kept returning to the instrument. It felt watchful, a nonsensical notion, yet the feeling persisted, tightening the tension in my shoulders. Defiance surged. I sat, picked up the violin again, determined to master this, whatever it was. An A minor scale. The tone was darker than ever, heavy, lightless, each note vibrating through my fingers, raising the fine hairs on my arms. And the echo, stronger now, a tangible hum shimmering in the air around me. Breath hitched in my throat. The back of my neck tingled. My hand trembled, the bow skittering across the string with a discordant scratch. I stopped abruptly. The echo pulsed for another moment, then slowly dissipated. Pressing a hand to my chest, I felt the wild race in my heart. Had anyone else known this? This symbiosis? This haunting? I muttered the question aloud into the empty room. Outside, the city slept, windows dark and unseeing. Sleep remained elusive that night. I paced the living room, a caged animal, my gaze repeatedly drawn to the violin on the coffee table. I left it there. Putting it away felt like a betrayal, a denial of its palpable presence. My eyes burned with exhaustion. Around 2 a.m, a new sound surfaced. Whispers, faint and indistinct, like hushed conversation in an adjacent room. A neighbor, perhaps? I pressed my ear to the shared wall. Nothing. The sound, I realized with a jolt of cold fear, emanated from the violin. Slowly, I turned. It rested on the table, inert. Gooseflesh erupted along my arms. My pulse roared. Swallowing hard against a rising nausea, I approached it. Lifting it, I felt that peculiar warmth radiating from the wood. Is anyone there? The question sounded absurd, addressed to inanimate timber. Only my own ragged breathing and the refrigerator's low hum answered. I tried a familiar lullaby, a simple piece known since childhood. The notes felt alien under my fingers. My left hand ached, fingertips raw, my bow arm throbbed with fatigue, sweat trickled down my temple. The echo swelled, insistent, inescapable, a tangible presence beside me. Stopping mid-phrase, I clutched the violin tightly against my chest, heart hammering like a trapped bird. The spectral resonance lingered, filling the room with sound even as silence reigned. Gritting my teeth, I forced myself to place the instrument back on the table. I stared, waiting for the last vibrations to fade. They did, eventually, leaving behind a profound emptiness. Days bled together, marked by the violin's deepening voice. Each practice session pulled its timbre further into shadow, a muffled quality underscored by a strange, vibrant undercurrent. The whispers became a nocturnal constant, sometimes seeming to drift from the closed case, other times materializing just behind my ear. My body existed in a perpetual state of high alert. Hands shook. A persistent ache settled in my gut. Coffee became fuel, staving off the sleep I now feared, dreaded waking again to find the violin fused to my grasp. Locking it away proved futile. The whispers seeped through wood and fabric. Hiding it under blankets only amplified its perceived presence. I felt ensnared. One evening, attempting composition, I sat hunched over my desk, sketching notes, trying to capture a slow, melancholic melody taking shape in my mind. My pen tapped rhythmically. I hummed the nascent phrase softly, and then I heard it. The violin, from within its closed case across the room, echoing my humming. A perfect, spectral mimicry. My throat closed. I froze, ice water flooding my veins. The case was latched, yet the sound was undeniable. My eyes darted wildly around the empty room. Slowly, deliberately, I approached the case, flicked the latches open. Inside, the violin lay still. I reached out, touched the wood. Warm, as if just played. My thoughts spun, chaotic. What did it want? Shutting the case felt like closing a door on a presence, not an object. Logic warred with experience. An old violin, unusual carvings, phantom echoes uncaptured by technology, profound physical anxiety, sleep deprivation. These were the tangible facts. The why remained terrifyingly elusive. Late one night, slumped on the floor, back against the sofa, I stared at the closed violin case. Exhaustion was a physical weight, my muscles screaming, eyelids heavy. As I drifted toward the edge of consciousness, a whisper, sharp and clear, sliced through the haze. My name. Faint, yet unmistakable, originating from the case. My heart leapt, pounding against my ribs. I scrambled to my feet too quickly, head swimming. I gripped the sofa arm, steadying myself against the sudden dizziness. My breathing sounded harsh, ragged in my own ears. The case remained inert. The whisper dissolved. Sweat slicked my palms. Action felt imperative, though I knew not what action to take. I crossed the room, opened the case, lifted the violin. My hands trembled violently. Raising it to my shoulder, I began to play. The melody from that first disorienting night, the slow, dragging tune. I hadn't consciously learned it, yet my fingers found the notes effortlessly. Dark, deliberate, pulsing. The echo surged, louder, more present than ever before. My arms locked, back rigid. I played until my fingers numbed, until movement became agony. When I finally lowered the bow, a profound chill had permeated the apartment. My teeth chattered. Setting the violin down carefully, I collapsed onto the sofa, staring blankly at the ceiling. Utterly drained, yet hyper-aware, my mind buzzing like frayed wires. I listened for the echo's retreat. It faded slowly, reluctantly. Closing my eyes brought no peace, only the swirling darkness behind my lids. The next day, I vowed avoidance. The instrument remained on the sofa, an unavoidable fixture in my small space. Faint murmurs still brushed against my hearing as I passed. The thought of disposal surfaced, returning it, selling it, but felt wrong, irresponsible. And, deeper still, a strange tether had formed. In these tumultuous days, music had flowed from me, more potent, more raw than anything I'd produced in months. Dark, yes, unsettling, certainly, but undeniably authentic, resonating from some core I hadn't known I possessed. So here I remain, in this apartment, the violin now perched on a chair opposite me. The quiet is rarely complete. Small sounds persist, soft, intermittent knocks, a faint scratching like fingernails on wood. Tension lives permanently in my shoulders, a knot at the base of my neck. In the dim evening light, the carvings on the violin's back and neck seem almost alive, each intricate swirl and groove demanding scrutiny. I force myself to look away. Tonight, a new composition awaits, born from a fevered half-dream. I anticipate the echo's return, the frantic surge of my pulse, the dampness on my palms. But the resistance has fractured. This violin, this entity, may be drawing me toward an abyss, but it has also illuminated a path, however shadowed. A tightness constricts my chest when I contemplate the trajectory, yet putting it down, truly silencing it, feels impossible now. Even locked away, its resonance vibrates within my skull. I will play. I will follow the unsettling harmonies, wait for the voice within the ancient wood to reveal its purpose, its truth locked within those cryptic spirals. Fighting it is exhaustion. Playing is the only way forward now. Sanity feels like a fragile commodity, easily spent, but I cannot turn back. Flames spat from the campfire, their sharp sounds mingling with the bright peals of my children's laughter against the crystalline mountain air. Our first night sequestered in the pines. Perfection seemed etched into the twilight. Had I possessed foresight, I would have seen the idyllic thread about to unravel into a maelstrom, its echoes destined to shadow our years. My name is Alara, 38 orbits around the sun, mother to 2 souls spun from Chicago's suburban sprawl. Liam, my husband, and I had dreamt this escape for months, a yearning to sever the digital tethers to simply be with Maya, 12, and Finn, 9. The cabin, a whisper on the internet, promised rustic solitude deep within the Canadian wilds, leagues from any signpost town. Those initial days unfolded like rare, sun-drenched maps. Halcyon moments of hiking timbered slopes, casting lines into the lake's glassy skin, tracing constellations in the velvet expanse above. The children, untethered from screens, bloomed. Liam and I rediscovered rhythms lost to the relentless chime of obligation. Then, the third night. Around the fire's hypnotic pulse, marshmallows browning, a sound fractured the peace. Footfalls in the bordering dark, possessed of a weight, a deliberation that spoke of something other than fauna. Liam rose, a silhouette against the flames, probing the blackness. "Hello?" His voice absorbed by the pines. "Anyone there?" Silence answered, stitched only with the forest's familiar nocturnal hum. We labeled it fancy, a trick of tired minds. Oh, the bitter clarity of hindsight, wishing we'd heeded that first dissonant note. Deep in the night's quiet heart, sleep shattered. A percussive crash reverberated through the timber frame, jolting me upright. Before thought could catch breath, our bedroom door splintered inward. 3 figures surged into the room, faces erased by knit masks, each brandishing the cold geometry of a firearm. "Don't move!" The command cracked like ice. "Quiet, and you live." My heart became a frantic drum against my ribs. Liam moved instinctively, a human shield, but a gloved hand seized him, wrenching him brutally from the bed. "The children. Where?" Another voice rasped, sharp with impatience. "Please," the word tore from my throat, a ragged whisper. "They're only children. Don't hurt them." The leader, taller, his eyes piercing chips of Arctic blue through the mask's slits, gave a curt nod. His companions vanished, reappearing scant moments later with Maya and Finn clutched in their grasp. My children, petrified, faces slick with tears. "Mama?" Finn's small voice trembled, a sound that undid me. Oh, the visceral ache to gather him close, to whisper assurances I couldn't possibly guarantee. They corralled us into the main room, shadows clinging to them like shrouds, forcing us onto the worn sofa. The leader, Silas, began to stalk the space before us, his weapon a constant, unwavering punctuation mark. "Attend," he commanded, his tone chillingly composed. "We require sanctuary, a place to weather a storm. You," his gaze swept over us, "will accommodate. Comply, and survival remains a possibility." Liam, ever the shield, found his voice. "Take anything. Possessions mean nothing. Just let my family walk away." Silas emitted a low chuckle, utterly devoid of warmth. "Regrettably, friend, the situation resists such simplicity. We find ourselves bound together for the duration." Through the suffocating hours that followed, fragments of their story surfaced. Fugitives, fresh from a high-stakes score in the nearest city. Our isolation, once a balm, now served as their perfect concealment until the pursuit cooled. We were granted the illusion of movement within the cabin walls, but their eyes were relentless anchors. One, the younger man called Reese, carried an air of reluctance, almost a shadow of apology in his guarded movements. His counterpart, Kyle, was pure aggression, his weapon leaping readily at the slightest perceived infraction. Yet it was Silas, the architect of our terror, who truly chilled my blood. A glacial detachment resided in those blue eyes, an unnerving certainty that our lives were mere variables in his equation, easily discarded. The days bled into one another, each sunrise marking another rotation in our fraught ballet of survival, soothing the children's fears while navigating the tripwires of our captors' moods. Liam and I communicated in the silent language of shared glances, desperate stratagems forming and dissolving against the reality of constant surveillance and confiscated lifelines. Hope felt like a distant shore. Then, on the fifth rotation, I observed Reese. A preoccupation had claimed him. His gaze kept drifting to the windows, scanning the tree line. When Silas and Kale momentarily stepped outside patrolling the perimeter, impulse seized me. "Reese," my whisper was barely audible, "you have to help. This is wrong. You see that?" He turned, the conflict stark upon his young face, a soul visibly riven. No. They'd kill me. "They might kill us regardless," I urged, the words sharp with desperation. "Think of the children, Reese, please." Silas and Kale re-entered before he could form a reply, but the brief exchange had consequence. I saw it flicker in his eyes, a hairline crack in his resolve, a seed sown in desperate soil. Later, cloaked in the borrowed stillness of the other's sleep, Reese materialized beside me in the dim kitchen. "The rear door," he breathed, the words barely disturbing the air. "Unlocked. After midnight. You didn't hear it from me." Adrenaline surged, a fierce current, a chance. a precipice draped in shadow, risk coiled tight in my gut. I woke Liam, the plan conveyed through urgent gestures and hushed fragments. Then, wakened Maya and Finn, easing them from slumber with insistent whispers about silence, absolute silence. We moved with a glacial pace toward the back door, each groan of the floorboards amplified to the crack of doom in the oppressive quiet. Freedom felt inches away, tangible. Then a voice, cold as the night air, sliced through the tension. "Leaving so soon?" Silas, looming in the hallway, weapon leveled. Despair plunged through me, so agonizingly close. But the tableau shifted, fractured by the unforeseen. Reese stepped from the shadows behind Silas, his own firearm now in play, steady. "Let them go, Silas. It ends here." A brittle impasse descended. Silas, calculating odds even now, realizing Cale still slept, slowly, reluctantly, lowered his gun's muzzle. "A grave error, Reese," he grated, venom thick in his voice. "My only error," Reese countered, voice trembling but resolute, "was following you this far." He flicked his gaze to us. "Go, run. I'll manage them." No second invitation needed. We burst through the unlocked door, plunging into the embracing chill of the forest night. Behind us erupted shouts, the unmistakable sounds of a struggle, but looking back was a luxury we couldn't afford. We fled, fueled by terror, until our lungs were ragged bellows, finally collapsing in a small moon-dappled clearing. Gasping, the impossible truth began to crystallize, alive, free, yet adrift, swallowed by wilderness, miles from anywhere, compassless, unprovisioned. Safety remained a distant mirage. Liam, drawn on some deep reserve, took command. "Move. We have to keep moving." We stumbled onward, navigating by the indifferent stars, praying for the artery of a road, a sign of human passage. Exhaustion frayed the children, yet fear and adrenaline were potent, if brutal, fuel. Dawn painted the eastern sky in bruised pastels when the sound reached us, the distant mechanical thrum of engines. A surge of desperate energy propelled us forward. We crashed through the final barrier of trees onto the shoulder of a paved highway. Relief washed over us, sharp and dizzying. It wasn't long before a transport truck slowed, its air brakes hissing. The driver, a man named Alistair with kindness etched into his features, took in our ragged state, listened to our fractured story with widening eyes. His phone connected us back to the world, to law enforcement. He ferried us toward civilization, toward the first semblance of safety. The ensuing days dissolved into a haze. Official questions, gentle medics, choked phone calls relaying the impossible. We learned Reese had indeed incapacitated Silas and Cale, holding the fort until authority arrived. His account, corroborating ours, sealed their fate, long years behind bars. Journeying homeward at last, the echoes of the ordeal resonated within me. The terror had been absolute, scoring lines on our souls that time might soften but never erase. Yet, intertwined with the fear was a profound thankfulness for Reese's pivotal shift, for the quiet mettle of my own family, for the unlooked-for grace of strangers like Alistair. Most striking was the resilience unearthed within us. Confronting the abyss we hadn't shattered, We had endured, resisted, broken free. The ties binding our family, already tightly woven, had been tempered in that crucible, emerging adamantine. That cabin, sought for tranquility, became instead the stage for our lives' most searing passage. But gazing at Liam, at Maya and Finn, weary, yes, but breathing, whole, together, a certainty settled deep within me. Whatever tempest life might yet brew, we would weather them. We had stared into the maw of the worst and walked away. Our intended idol twisted into a maelstrom, yet in navigating its fury, we discovered an indomitable core, a strength we never knew we possessed. It was a Tuesday, thick with the basement's breath, when the cassette surfaced. Down in the library's underbelly, sorting cardboard sarcophagi marked storage, the air hung heavy, a stale perfume of forgotten paper and damp concrete. Dust, fine as pollen, settled on my sleeves. My sinuses felt packed with cotton. Above, a single fluorescent tube offered a sputtering, erratic pulse of light against the gloom. I remember wresting a box from a high metal shelf, its cardboard softened by seasons of neglect, the tape sealing its lid brittle and peeling. A faint, dry rattle sounded from within as I lowered it. Kneeling on the cool floor, I sliced the tape, folded back the flaps, and discovered them. A neat stack of cassette tapes, their labels adorned with spidery, tilting script. Dates span the early 70s, 1972, 1975, and the years between. As an archivist, I traffic in remnants, diaries, brittle letters, newsprint ghosts, recorded whispers. Yet these tapes felt different, imbued with an unfamiliar gravity. The labels bore names unknown to any library record, punctuated by cryptic penciled notes. Session 3, Week 5. A current of intrigue, sharp and sudden, coursed through me. My heart picked up its rhythm, a dampness slicked my palms, unearthing the untouched, the decades lost. This was the quiet thrill of my vocation. I carefully detached the topmost tape. A faint sepia bloom, perhaps coffee, stained the label. Elias, July 11th, 1973. Nothing more. The entire cache came upstairs with me, to the small annex off the main archive floor where my workstation resided. A dusty, near-obsolete cassette deck sat on a side table, a relic itself. Wiping it down, my mind spun with conjecture. Who was this Elias? And why consign these intimate recordings to the library's subterranean oblivion? I slotted the first tape into the machine's waiting mouth. A burst of static, then a voice emerged, distant, weary, male, followed by a woman's, calm, measured, probing his feelings. A therapy session. My throat constricted. A sudden, acute awareness of my solitude filled the room. The uncomfortable sensation of being an unseen interloper. I let it play for perhaps 10 minutes. The man, Elias, spoke of anxieties woven into his work life. The woman, presumably his therapist, gently steered him toward the emotional core of his professional discontent. The faint protest of a chair spring punctuated his shifting weight. Awkwardness warred with fascination. Eventually, I ejected the tape, driven by a need to understand the scope of this find. Were they all connected? Sifting through the box revealed more names: Clara, Simon, Arthur, and Elias again, his name reappearing on several labels, dates often spaced a week apart. No official markings, no institutional letterhead, no case files, just the tapes, orphaned and anonymous. My supervisor, meticulous about inventory, had never breathed a word of such recordings. For now, this discovery would remain mine alone. I selected another labeled Elias, August the 1st, 1973, feeding it to the deck. His voice returned, this time burdened by guilt. He spoke elliptically of familial avoidance, never quite pinning down the specifics. Then, a recurring dream. A cold clench formed low in my gut as he described its setting. A small house bordering a park, encircled by a tall, imposing fence. The detail snagged. My own childhood home echoed that description. The fence, a towering barrier in memory. I rubbed my temples, reasoning against the surge of unease. Countless houses stand near parks. Fences are commonplace. It signified nothing. The remainder of the afternoon dissolved into fragments of recorded lives. Brief immersions into Clara's world, then Simon's. All seemed to orbit the same therapist, her tone a constant level anchor amidst their varied tempests, weekly anxieties, interpersonal friction, shadowed fears. A persistent itch lingered at the base of my skull, a sense that something fundamental was misaligned, though its shape remained elusive. Clocking out, I felt as though I'd trespassed on hallowed ground. A faint tremor visited my hands as I contemplated those voices trapped on magnetic ribbon. I carried the box to my cramped office, securing it within a locked filing cabinet. Home that evening offered little solace. My one-bedroom apartment, with its complaining floorboards and temperamental heating, felt hollow. Leftover pasta, consumed without thought, did nothing to settle me. The television droned, unwatched, my focus continually snagged by the memory of the tapes. A restless tremor agitated my legs. I killed the TV, surrendering to the quiet pressure of the room. Had listening been a mistake? Yet the compulsion to delve deeper, to understand, was undeniable. An archivist's duty, I rationalized, cataloging the find. Just another day's work. Tomorrow, perhaps just one or two more. Morning found me at the library before the doors officially opened, drawn by an urgency I couldn't name. Straight to the office, the cabinet lock yielding with a soft click. I retrieved a handful of cassettes, carrying them to my desk where a smaller, portable player, unearthed from a back closet, awaited. The machine whirred softly as I pressed play on Elias, September 10th, 1973. He recounted a confrontation, someone named Julian accusing him of dishonesty. A jolt, sharp and physical, went through my chest. Years ago, a colleague, Julian, had levied a similar accusation regarding omitted details in a collaborative project. Coincidence, surely. Names repeat. My brow furrowed. I rubbed my damp palms against my trousers. The subsequent tape amplified the disquiet. Elias, September 17th, 1973. He detailed a dreamscape dominated by a corridor, its walls plastered with unfamiliar images. At its terminus, an impassable door. Claustrophobia radiated from his words. I recognized the architecture of the nightmare. It had visited my own sleep. A crawl of unease traced my scalp. Leaning closer, elbows braced on the desk, I strained to catch every nuance. My stomach tightened. In the dream, Elias recounted. He heard his name called, but the voice was his own, distorted, echoing back. I stabbed the pause button, drawing a ragged breath. Sweat beaded on my forehead. Resuming playback yielded only the therapist's soothing instructions to relax. Lunch was a tasteless affair, my sandwich reduced to texture and bulk. The uncanny parallels replayed in my mind, a frantic search for logical loopholes. Random chance, I insisted silently. Dreams are drawn from a common wellspring. Hallways are archetypal. Yet the constriction in my chest, the shallowness of my breath, refused to yield. Back in the office, I deliberately chose a different voice. Listening to Clara or Simon might dilute the unnerving resonance with Elias. Clara, October 2nd, 1973. She spoke of a colleague, subtly undermining, persistently difficult. The dynamic mirrored precisely my own fraught relationship with Isabel. A chill mapped its way up my arms. Then, a detail about a malfunctioning elevator necessitating weeks of stair climbing. It had happened in my own building just last year. I stared, unseeing, at the tape player. The frantic drumbeat behind my ears grew louder. How could these mid-century confessions echo my present so faithfully? I rewound, listened again, verifying. Her account was explicit, trapped, call in maintenance, the subsequent 4 flight climbs. My mouth felt parched. I counted silently to 10, trying to anchor my breathing, closing my eyes against the sudden weight of the air. A new imperative surfaced. Identify the therapist. Perhaps her identity held the key. I returned to the original box, sifting through its contents more thoroughly. Tucked in a corner, a small, spiral-bound notebook surfaced. Inside, cryptic jottings, appointment times, disconnected phone numbers, dates aligning with the tapes. No name, no clinic, nothing concrete. The therapist's voice, calm, direct, slightly raspy, ageless, offered no clues. Library archives yielded nothing. No record of therapeutic partnerships, no mention of these sessions in any catalog. My regular duties blurred, neglected. Days became dedicated to the tapes. I meticulously noted every correspondence, every chilling echo of my own existence. It felt like assembling a shattered mirror, each recognized shard sending a spike through my heart rate, stealing my breath. My back muscles knotted. Stretching became a frequent necessity. The recordings, rooted firmly in the early 70s, painted a picture of a city I knew, referenced buildings like the one on Elm Street where I'd once lived, described the library's tall, narrow windows with unnerving accuracy. I played that section back 3 times, eyes fixed on the turning spindles. One afternoon, listening to Arthur, March 3rd, 1975, I heard him describe friction with a supervisor named Mr. Davies. The conflict, arguments over late hours, ambiguous responsibilities, mirrored my own past struggles with a manager of the same name. Cold perspiration prickled the back of my neck. I fumbled for a tissue, dabbing my forehead, a dull throb starting behind my temples. Each narrative felt like a distorted reflection, specific skewed but the core uncannily familiar. Sleep offered no escape. My dreams became extensions of the tapes, populated by drab office furniture and the murmur of recorded voices. I'd wake abruptly, heart hammering, sheets damp, switching on the light to stare at the ceiling, battling the conviction that these magnetic phantoms were bleeding into my reality. I confided in no one, fearing dismissal, ridicule. What proof existed beyond these antiquated cassettes and my increasingly frayed nerves? I scoured old city directories, newspaper archives, searching for any trace of 70s group therapy initiatives that might explain the tape's presence. Nothing. The tension coiled tighter in my chest. My hands trembled whenever I loaded a new cassette. One evening, I lingered long after closing. The library settled into its nocturnal quietude, vast and echoing, most lights extinguished. In my office, illuminated by the solitary cone of my desk lamp, I inserted one final tape. Elias, November 20th, 1973. He started with familiar refrains of professional entrapment. Then, he recounted a workplace incident, a confrontation mirroring one I'd experienced just last month. He even uttered a phrase I'd flung in anger. "Stop twisting my meaning." My own voice echoed the words in my skull. My heart slammed against my ribs. I shot up, hitting stop, breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. My limbs felt strangely heavy. Picking up the cassette, I stared at the handwritten label, my throat aching. A violent urge to hurl it against the wall surged and subsided. My eyes burned with exhaustion. The low hum of the building system seemed to press in on my ears. Muscles screamed from hours of strained listening. Midnight had passed. The profound isolation of the empty library wrapped around me. I switched off the player, locked the box away, and walked towards the exit. Footsteps unnaturally loud in the cavernous silence. Each shadow seemed to lengthen. I glanced back repeatedly, the pressure in my chest unbearable. Outside in my car, the drive home was a blur. That night, the tapes played relentlessly in my mind, an internal feedback loop I couldn't shut off. My scalp felt tight, restlessness keeping me pacing the confines of my living room. The cassettes felt invasive, parasitic. I scanned my surroundings, the worn patches on the carpet, the kitchen light's intermittent flicker, the peeling paint around the window, desperate for tangible anchors to the present. I am here, now. But the parallels relentlessly intruded. Sleep, when it came, was shallow, haunted by the therapist's calm cadence, the image of the turning reels. A hollow ache resided in my chest. The next morning brought resolve. I retrieved the box from my office, carried it down to the deepest storage vault in the basement, and locked it away in an anonymous metal cabinet, ensuring it wouldn't be easily rediscovered. Then I informed my supervisor I needed personal leave, effective immediately. No details offered. My voice was steady, though my hand shook beneath the desk. He granted the request without probing. Walking out of the library into the flat morning light felt like surfacing. Behind the wheel of my car, a strange admixture of relief and a persistent knot of fear settled in my stomach. Those tapes existed. They held fragments of my life recorded decades before my birth. The question, how, hung unanswered, vast and terrifying. Now I sit at home, trying not to think. My hands still carry a residual tremor when Elias's weary voice surfaces in memory. My chest tightens recalling Clara's story of the broken elevator. The how and why remain shrouded, impenetrable. Looking further feels like courting madness. Part of me yearns to return, to incinerate the source of this psychic haunting. Another part whispers of missed clues, of explanations lurking just beyond reach. But for now, there is only the blank wall opposite, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, and the conscious effort to draw breath without feeling that familiar, prickling dread. I wish, with an intensity that surprises me, that the basement had kept its secrets.